Welcome to Buckmasters Basics. Today we've got our good buddy Cody Griffin with us from Easton Arrows, and we want to actually talk about arrow spine. I think most importantly, Cody, when we get into this, I think there are two questions we want to answer. I think number one to me is exactly what is arrow spine? And number two is why is it important? How does it affect my setup from accuracy to penetration?
That's a great question, man. Arrow spine it's very confusing for a lot of people, and all arrow spine is simply a deflection whenever we span an arrow 14 inches from the center, so 14 inches this way, 14 inches this way, and we end up hanging roughly about 2 pounds in the center, and it gives us a deflection. So that flex is what spine is, and just because an arrow says, like this one says 300 on it, that doesn't mean that's how much the arrow weighs. That's the given deflection whenever we span it 14 inches left and right and hang 2 pounds on the center. And it's critical when selecting spine for arrow flight, for optimum arrow flight, for choosing the most accurate setup, knowing what arrow spine you're supposed to be in for whatever game you're going after.
Okay, so you actually picked up a 4mm FMJ here. So in this particular arrow shaft, what you're saying is there are various spines within this particular shaft. So all 4mm FMJs are not created equal.
Correct, indeed. In this particular lineup, there's 4 spines. You got a 400, you got a 340, a 300, and a 250. And one thing to note, the higher that number goes, the weaker that arrow is, the larger that deflection. So let's just say there's many spines on the market from a 2000 to a 100, that 2000 spine is super, super weak. It's very, very flexible. That 100 spine arrow, it's going to be very stiff and rigid, and there's purposes for that.
Okay. So as we're looking at this, we know we need to select the right spine now. Yeah. So why is it important, and what factors influence the spine? I mean, does the spine the exact same? Is it going to fly different for different people, I guess is my question. So if we're shooting a 28-inch arrow or a 30-inch full shaft, is it going to be different? Will the spine react differently depending on arrow length? So why is it important to the process and to our setup?
I look at arrows as being like a tailor-made system, just because you shoot a FMJ, 400 or whatever it is at a certain poundage, doesn't mean I'm going to shoot that. Doesn't mean it's going to be built for me. To give you an example, my specs, I'm a 27.5-inch draw length, shooting about 70, 72 pounds, 26.5-inch arrow though. So my arrow's a little bit shorter than my draw length, and I've got my bow set up that way for a reason, and I have about 150 grains up front of this arrow, and that's total. So that's with the half out and the broadhead. And I shoot a 340 because that's what tunes the best for me. That's where the spine chart is kind of telling me where I should belong at in there. And the spine charts, you can find them on the back of many arrow boxes. Some of them you can search with a QR code or head to a manufacturer's website and kind of see where you fit in for arrow spine.
Okay, why is the spine important? What does it do to the actual flight of the arrow itself? And does it affect our penetration? Does it affect accuracy? What factors play into that, and why is it so important?
So there's many factors. Poundage is a big factor. The cam system that a bow might have, whether it's a single cam or a binary cam, what's harder on the arrow. Arrow length is a big role player in that as well, and also point weight. So combined point weight. How heavy is our insert or half out? How heavy is our broadhead? All those are key factors when selecting arrow spine. And what can happen is if, let's say we have an arrow that's too weak, when that arrow gets under load, as far as when the bow is fired, it flexes very rapidly and harshly throughout the system. And typically a weaker arrow will always tune to the right for a right-handed shooter and to the left for a left-handed shooter. When an arrow is too stiff for that setup, it's not optimal, it'll actually flex very slowly. It'll transition or porpoise out of that bow, not in a direction that we want it to. And typically a stiff arrow will shoot left for a right-handed shooter and right for a left-handed shooter. Now when we have a optimal setup, we get out of this what we call archer's paradox. And the goal is to get out of archer's paradox as smooth and as quickly as possible. So what happens when we have an optimal setup, under load, when that bow is fired, it'll flex real nice out of a transition just off the shelf or off the rest, whether it's recurve or compound, and it'll flex and it'll transition into a straight flying arrow. One of the examples I like to give is if you ever played baseball, when you square up a baseball perfectly, you hit the ball hard, it's going to go far. If you hit the top of the baseball or the bottom of the baseball, it's not going to do what you want it to do. Exactly. Same thing when hunting. When we choose an arrow that has optimal spine, when it has all the conditions are perfect, that arrow is going to penetrate the object perfectly in the sense of lateral knock travel. So that knock is going to be directly behind that field pointer, that broadhead, the broadhead where we're shooting, and that's going to create for optimal penetration. Versus if it's canted left or right or any of those, induced factors of being too weak or too stiff, we're not going to have the best penetration we could.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, having an optimum setup is going to affect everything across the board, and more importantly, I think one of the biggest points that we have to consider in archery as a whole is accuracy and confidence.
Indeed.
So this does spine has a huge impact on accuracy and confidence and what you're trying to accomplish there. Folks, I hope that actually helps you get to answer some questions on arrow spine and what it is and why it's important to the process. It does have a lot of huge factors. Some of it gets a little more technical than what I understand, but hopefully that helps you out so when you're with your arrow selection process this year.